Okay, Mr. Mayor, when you're ready.
Hello and welcome to this online extraordinary meeting of Colchester Borough Council on the 12th of August 2020. I'm Councillor Nick Cope, Mayor of the Borough of Colchester, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. We have only one item of business this evening, the motion regarding new nuclear at Bradwell. This meeting is being broadcast live via Zoom over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel and will also be available to watch afterwards. To begin, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Would all participants please mute their microphones unless they are invited to speak? Could participants indicate to speak using the raise hands facility? All votes tonight will be administered by a roll call of councillors by the monitoring officer. We will look to have a break at approximately 7:30 and at approximately 90 minutes intervals after that. Apologies have been received from councillors Barton, Crowe, Arnold, Coleman, Ellis, Luxford Vaughan, Moore, P. Oxford, and Scott Boutell. Can I ask any councillor to declare any interest that they might have on any item on the agenda? There's only one item anyway. Are there any declarations of interest, please? Can you indicate by raising your hand and then speaking? No. We have 7 speakers this evening. I will announce speakers by name in turn, who will each be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The Democratic Services Officer will indicate when the time has elapsed, and speakers will be required to stop at this point. Once all representations have been made, all the visiting speakers should leave the meeting. The remainder of the meeting will be available to view on the Council's YouTube channel. Can I invite Councillor Banks, West Mersey Town Council, to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And let me open by saying West Mersey Town Council and our residents support the policy that the Council will be debating this evening. And I'm going to highlight some important considerations. The people. There will be impacts and consequences for the borough's residents should Bradwell B go ahead. Clearly, the local impact on the residents and visitors to Mersey Island to then have to permanently view and hear a vast and noisy industrial complex is indisputable. However, daily HGV construction traffic movements on the A12 alone would be in the hundreds, with the 700 deliveries forecast to the site per day, and that's on top of the itinerant workforce, probably drawn from all over the UK. The place. The Dengie Peninsula has a raft of environmental designations, including SSSI, Ramsar, National Nature Reserve, Special Areas of Conservation and Special Protection Areas. The Blackwater Estuary is in the Marine Conservation Zone. This brings me to the prospect of the hybrid cooling towers, and although they would not abstract as much water as the former station did, but unlike the old station, they would deposit highly increased levels of saline back into the estuary, plus a plume of water vapour equivalent to 3 Olympic swimming pools worth of the Blackwater River every hour. And power. For the second time, the UK National Grid has asked EDF to reduce the electrical output of the nuclear power station Sizewell B by 50% for yet another month to prevent overloading the grid. It could be argued that this alone means there's no need for more nuclear power. However, that is disputable by some people, yet this is at a time when only 8 out of 15 of the UK reactors are running anyway. The variable renewable sources of electrical energy, solar and wind, need variable counterbalancing sources that are available instantly at the flick of a switch, not take a day or two to power up. And also, please bear in mind when you consider this policy that nuclear does not produce zero carbon. That does not stand up to scrutiny. And there is another force of power in play here. EDF is effectively a state-owned company of the French, and CGN, Chinese General Nuclear, is effectively a state-owned company of the Chinese, desperate to have their unproven in-house designed reactor deposited on a peripheral community on the East Coast, which is so vulnerable to sea level rise. With my practical scientific mind, I endorse this policy. With my passionately environmental green pumping heart, I endorse this policy. I ask all councillors, regardless of political persuasion, to please vote for this policy. Thank you.
Can I invite Teresa Schreier to speak, please?
Yes, hello. Hello, everybody. I know you can't see me, but I'm here. I live actually in Bradwell on Sea, actually on the Malden Road, which is going to be the main route into the power station. I'm absolutely horrified with the thought of this power station going ahead at the immense size of it. It is going to swallow up our tiny little village, our beautiful village, and it is going to be a complete working area for this power station that I'm concerned deeply about. But obviously everybody's going to have their say, and my main concern at the moment is with the roads coming in. If they're going to be building roads, what are they going to do with all these beautiful houses that are along them, that are listed houses, and the routes and the amount of traffic going in past my house into our little village? It is just going to be absolutely horrendous. I'm completely worried about it. I think it's just, I can't see the vast amount. There's going to be continual traffic, continual noise, and our village is just going to be completely disturbed with the sound, with the mess, with the amount of lorries, and there's the routes in. They're suddenly saying all these different routes. Have they spoken to people? People are saying that their gardens are going to be used up in parts of the roads going into where the station is, because it's going to have to go in just past the village. I just can't understand how this can even be allowed to go ahead for the extent of our beautiful area. It's going to ruin not only Bradwell, all the villages surrounding, all the Dengie, all up to Colchester, Chelmsford, all the roads, everywhere. It's just going to be the most disastrous and horrendous thing that I could imagine happening to a village that I moved to 3 years ago for peace and quiet and a beautiful countryside, to having it devastated by an immense power station that I can't see why we're having the Chinese coming in if they have to. There's Rolls-Royce that are doing these things. I don't really want nuclear anyway. There must be other things that can be done. But the sole reason of my main concern is, with everything, I don't want the power station to go ahead, because I think the destruction on the area with all the beautiful houses, all the beautiful little lanes, all our villages are going to be destroyed. And I just think it's just a crime shame this is allowed to go ahead, and I think we've got to fight to stop it. And I hope everybody understands my feelings about it. You know, I've got a lovely house, and it's going to be smashed to bits with stones and rocks and God knows what coming off the road as these vast lorries are going to trundle by all day. My life is just going to be completely changed, as our village is going to be totally wrecked. The immense size of the site is going to come completely up to Bradwell Marina. It's going to go engulf the village and go quite a long way out. It's going to be a blot on the landscape. It's going to be absolutely enormous, and I can't see how it's going to be any benefit to our area in any shape or form than devastation. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much. That's two very interesting views from Mersey. Can I now ask John Acker to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking at this very important meeting. Can I say straight away that I applaud the decision by the Council to have this debate, with all the consultation and side meetings that have been taking place with party groups so it could happen. There are many things that can be said about the motion and the proposed new nuclear power station at Bradwell. There will be many other contributions that will deal with the issues affecting the Blackwater and those that live nearby. But I want to say one thing. We often talk about what divides us. Here is an opportunity, if you like, as Colchester United, excuse the pun, to come together and say with a very strong voice, we are together. You are a very important and major council in Essex, and for you to oppose Bradwell B is a very significant step, not for reasons of not on our doorstep, but very sound environmental, climate and planning reasons. I urge you to do this for all our futures, and particularly for our children, to support this motion. if you agree, I hope you do tonight, to use it to give it as much attention as you possibly can to publicise it. Shout it from the rooftops that Colchester Borough Council is against it. Use the huge networks you as a council have. Use it to influence our neighbouring authorities. Use it in our great university. Use it to Essex County Council. You should change your mindset on this, and use it to influence our community, why they need to be behind the council on this, and to join forces with our very influential MPs to get them to support it. I know that ward councillors in my area have been pressing for this debate. There's good reason to do so tonight. They have supported residents in their concerns about the lack of consultation, and like myself have raised great fears on the local environment, evacuation and other issues. I strongly say that the new document should be robust and clear. I know that the rewrite must be done very quickly, but I hope we can get an assurance tonight on behalf of those in Mersey and others nearby that we will be consulted as part of this new formulation of document that will come ready. We stand ready to contribute. I know the leader has already received from the Mersey Island Society a very strong plea for them to be involved, and there are many who wish to be involved, like the West Mersey Town Council and myself. I hope this tonight will go down in history of the borough as a night where one of the clearest stands was taken. Lots of us believe in this motion. Please defeat it tonight, because this is a daft proposal and should be defeated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Acker. Can I now invite Robbie Spence to speak?
Okay, yeah, hi, good evening, councillors, chair, mayor, everyone. Thank you very much for this have your say. It's great that the council has all these have your says and lets people just say what they want to you. Well, I've always been opposed to nuclear power because nobody's ever told me what is a sensible thing to do with the waste without it falling into the sea and radiating the fish and the diet and the food chain and everything. So I don't want to go on about that. I want to focus on Bradwell, B, and say basically what the group called BANG, Blackwater Against Nuclear Group, can say much better than I can. They've got this guy, Andy Blowers, who's their chairperson, who's a professor of, I think he's basically an expert. And so he basically is writing, and I agree with this, Bradwell B is unsustainable, unsuitable, and unacceptable as a site for a massive new nuclear power station. And so he goes through these three things in 13,000 words. I can't go through it all now, but I'll give you the three headlines. Unsustainable, because it's low-lying, it's basically on the sea level. All nuclear power stations generally are, because they need the water to cool them down. And because it's low-lying, it's going to be subject to storm surges and sea level rises, and we know those things are coming down the line. And the idea of building a ward, I don't think it's sustainable. I think we need those kind of marshes like Essex has got to stay the way they are, because they are the very thing that can absorb storm surges and the problems which we face with the sea level going up in climate change world in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So that's unsustainable. Secondly, unsuitable. Yeah, it's going to destroy this very marshland, its specific estuary, which I mentioned about. I think there's something also about the Blackwater River is not actually sufficient in its the amount of water that trickles through to sustain a massive power station like this. Thirdly, unacceptable because of the danger of nuclear power station accidents. You know, Fukushima. The scale of Fukushima in our location would affect 500,000 people, including as far as Colchester, Chelmsford and Southend. So there we are. I've got 3/4 of a minute to go, and I just want to say something particularly addressing to the Conservative councillors. I know that Bernard Jenkins,
Should they come now?
A couple of years ago, has put on record that he's objecting to Bradwell because of the China security cyber risk factor, because the Chinese are providing the technology and everything, and he thinks it's dangerous with our national security. So that's something which I hope will appeal to some of the people on the other side of the fence from where I come from. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Robbie Spence. Can I now invite Ian Clark to speak?
Thank you. The importance of the Bradwell B Stage 1 consultation is that Bradwell B is a nationally significant infrastructure project. The application is decided by the Planning Inspectorate and not Malden District Council, although it is the host authority. Under the NSIP process, Colchester Borough Council, as a neighbouring authority, has an equal influence on the application to Malden District Council. Planning Inspectorate makes clear in describing the NSIP process that the Stage 1 consultation provides the main opportunity for consultees to influence the project, after which there is limited scope for a consultee such as Colchester Borough Council to do that, illustrating the importance of this consultation. I am, for example, concerned in the context of Mersey Island and evacuation that under current regulatory protocol, the applicant may obtain a development consent order before a credible evacuation plan has been devised, which is only required later after a nuclear site license and before that is applied for. Colchester Borough Council must, for example, insist for the protection of both Mersey Island residents and its visitors that no development consent order is issued before the feasibility of a credible evacuation plan, if feasible, is determined, and the project should not be allowed to proceed further without this being addressed in the interests of public safety. I also consider Colchester Borough Council should advise the Planning Inspectorate of its objection to the Stage 1 consultation process for reasons of its limitations in scope during the pandemic and for various other reasons such as I have provided to the Council separately. I ask the Borough Council withdraws its recent limited and inconclusive response to the consultation, makes a comprehensive response, objecting to the proposals and reflecting, but also updating its earlier strategic overview and scrutiny panel review, and prepares that in consultation with affected parishes and others. In conclusion, I just thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this meeting. Thank you.
Can I invite Simon Miles Taylor to speak, please? No? Thank you very much, Mr. Clark, for your contribution. I should have said that earlier. Can I invite Professor Blowers to speak, please?
Good evening. You can hear me, I hope. I'd like to say that Bang has been in this business since 2008 and has taken the view throughout that Bradwell is a totally unsuitable site for a nuclear power station. We were very pleased in the early years to collaborate with Colchester Borough Council, who in 2010 put out a policy that was wholly against it. It was a very good document, a robust rejection of the site suitability. We're back where we were now, and what Colchester said then is still very much relevant now, except that a number of things have happened since then which will reinforce the position that Colchester took and I hope will take in the future. Among those things are the declining need for nuclear power in the face of cheaper renewable alternatives. This has already been alluded to. Therefore, the need for nuclear is not so strong, if at all. The second thing is the increasing concerns about climate change and the likelihood that the site, with its radioactive waste into the next century, could be overwhelmed by changes in coastal processes through climate change. And thirdly, there is the scale of the power station itself is far larger than was thought to be the case in 2010, when there was about 1 gigawatt. The present proposals are double that at 2.2 gigawatts. So Bradwell, and I think this point really needs to be got over, Bradwell has been, the government has seen it as a potentially suitable site. It is not, as CGN had put forward, that the government, that decision has already been taken. The government has selected the site, but the question is the potential suitability. And therefore, Colchester's opposition, I believe, should be wholly about the site itself and its unsuitability. Unsuitability for 4 reasons. One, it's inappropriate. The scale of this project is colossal and horrifying, as I think most people saw when it was first came out at the beginning of this year. We have turbines, 2 giant reactors, 2 cooling towers, tunnels into the estuary, port facilities, transmission towers, accommodation blocks. All of this will utterly transform the Dengie Peninsula and the Blackwater estuary and transform it from a peaceful rural community into an industrial complex. The site is unsuitable. It is low-lying, flat, liable to flood, and as I've said, with climate change impacts, will become eventually unviable while there will still be materials on that site, including highly dangerous radioactive wastes. The site is also unacceptable in the sense that should a major incident occur, a major accident, there will be no way of dealing with it through any emergency planning process. It is inconceivable that emergency plans could effectively protect the large populations such as Mersey Island and Colchester itself and beyond in that event. And that there are around about 1/3 of a million people live within range of the nuclear power station. And lastly, the site is unsuitable. It's unsuitable because of the environmental destruction, the loss of habitats, the impacts on the estuary's fishing, oysters, heritage and recreation, which would transform it, as I've said, into a dangerous and depressing nuclear complex. BANG wants the company, if it's going to proceed, to undertake a social impacts assessment because the impacts on people's lives and well-being is massive. And we would hope that Colchester would join with us in making that representation. And finally, BANG and the CBC have worked together on the Bradwell issue over the years. We have kept in close contact and we remain committed to providing our resources and support in the endeavour to reject Bradwell as a potentially suitable site for Bradwell B. And I hope with working together, we are able and will be able to bring about the defeat of these proposals in the relatively near future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Blowers, for a very wide-ranging contribution. Now, I'd like to invite Councillor Corey to move the motion on behalf of all group leaders. This is the one motion we're going to discuss this evening. All the speakers have been speaking to it, and can Councillor Corey now move the motion itself?
Thank you, Mayor. I hope you can hear me because, like many of us, I'm on holiday at the moment and may have some interruptions from things in the background at the pub that I'm at, and that explains my more holiday dress as well. So I'm not as smart as you, I apologise. But good evening, everybody, and thank you to all those speakers. Those contributions were personal, but also professional in terms of looking at the wider aspects. And I think it's so important that I wanted to bring this to full council, and I'm glad that I was able to get cross-party support to bring that this discussion this evening. So we have a number of issues. First of all, the consultation period. And in our submission, we said that the consultation period was not adequate. And I would be happy to take further complaints to the planning inspectorate. We did discuss that at scrutiny, and that's been brought up this evening as well by one of the speakers. Instead, we have informed the consultation that our submission to change based on further democratic processes, that we will update that with further information based on our democratic processes, which are happening this evening. So in front of you, you have the motion where I've made very clear that we will object on local grounds to Bradwell nuclear power. new nuclear. I think that's something that we should all be able to get behind. The consultation did not give enough time, did not give enough information. That's something we've put in the submission, but I want to go much further than our original submission. So thank you to the Have Your Say speakers. Mr. Banks made some very good points, and Mr. Acker made points about involvements in local bodies going forward. We've done that in the past as Colchester Borough Council. We'll take that forward when the next consultations come out. We are not the planning authority involved, but we're very much a key party that needs to be consulted, and we will consult the public in our areas to then put forward a much fuller submission. I do agree with Bang as well about the unsustainable, unsuitable, unacceptable nature. I personally do, based on my beliefs and my research into the matter. And I'm happy to work with Professor Blowers to work further on this, as we have done previously, meeting before over the last few years. So I want to say that we are discussing the local aspects of nuclear. I'll just rule out some of the reasons why I believe nuclear still isn't. It's waste, it's not truly renewable. There are other investments in alternative reliable renewable energies we should go for. It's dangerous. We've got more external threats than we had before, even 10 years ago. And the decommissioning remains a problem. And also the local aspects with climate change and increasing sea levels. Against nuclear, but we've got to look tonight at Bradwell in particular. So I was lucky enough to be on the Task and Finish group in 2009 to look at the local aspects of new nuclear at Bradwell, and luckily actually in 2007, 2008 I studied at Essex University environmental politics and the case for nuclear. Furthermore, I've recently attended meetings with the EA.
Councillor Corey is finished. Could you invite the members of the public to leave?
With nuclear regulator, and definitely have found out a lot more. So hopefully you can still hear me and the connection is still okay. I'm just going to go on to some of the nuclear local grounds for why not to go for Bradwell. So on safety grounds, we cannot guarantee the safety of all of our residents. We cannot safely evacuate Mersey. There's, as people have said before, emergency plans will not be adequate enough for Mersey to be safe. I have to, as leader, and as this council has to plan to keep our residents safe in any emergency. We cannot do that with Bradwell new nuclear. We also wouldn't benefit from the direct economic impacts. We're over an hour away, so we won't be able to get all the benefits. There will be some small aspects that may impact our borough, but overall we will not get the direct impacts of this development. But the massive impact is the local environmental impact. What we would see, that we've seen before with Bradwell nuclear, is bleaching of the coastline, destruction of habitats, killing fish with the suction of the water coming into the cooling towers. The water goes back out with chlorinated, much more chlorinated water, heated water, and that just really disturbs and destructs the habitats of the breeding of fish, but also in particular the Colchester oyster, which is one of our famous exports. And we do not want to ruin that. We do not want to disturb that. We do not want to cause destruction on our border in our local environment. So for those reasons, I really believe and strongly believe in the evidence that new nuclear at Bradwell is unsuitable. And we should therefore have a clear, so you have much in front of you. I will happily sum up further later on. I'm not going to take any more of your time. So please be clear that this is accepting the differences of nuclear power across the country and strategically, but looking at the local environmental impacts at Bradwell for Colchester Borough and for our local environment. I would say object and please vote for this motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Leader. I should have asked all the visiting speakers to leave the meeting after they'd spoken before Councillor Corey spoke. Is that possible, please, for the visiting speakers to leave? We are seeing a tremendous amount of agreement across all political parties and all contributors. Can I ask Councillor Goss, please, to speak?
Hello, right, got the technology to work. So I fully support this motion to further feedback concerns about the proposed possible power station. I actually worked much earlier in my career for what was Eastern Electricity Power Gen stroke E.ON. So I do know quite a bit about the energy industry, as I spent 7 very happy years working in different parts of the business and visited various power stations. Gas and coal-fired power stations, so I do understand how they work, but also the impact that power stations have on the environment. But we do have a crisis in this country where government and successive governments, as not a political comment, have prevaricated and not actually dealt with the longevity of energy supply in this country. It's absolutely right that we back renewables, that we back turbines, wave power, solar power as the future, and it's a huge industry in this country, employing many thousands of people and worth many hundreds of millions of pounds, and will increase. However, communities like the communities that have represented their areas tonight have concerns if you do try and put solar farms in fields, or certainly turbines in areas of natural beauty. There's various protests going on in Suffolk at the moment about huge great wind turbines being put in the countryside there. So this is no different. We obviously don't have a direct planning say on the outcome of this, as it's not actually in Colchester Borough. However, it will affect our local communities, particularly places like Mersey, particularly if chlorinated water is put in, and will affect the oyster and fishing communities there without question. So we absolutely must object to it on those local environmental grounds without question. But the government does have to come up with a much better strategy in delivering energy, because we are at a crisis point, and nuclear. Go on, Nick.
You have another minute.
I think.
Beg your pardon.
Okay, thank you very much. So overall, absolutely support the motion, and looking forward to hearing more of the debate and supporting our local communities in ensuring that the impact on our communities is raised at the highest possible level. Our MPs also need to get together and ensure that collective wider voices are heard across these parts of Essex as well. So we do definitely need to make sure that our MPs step up and raise those concerns. But I'll certainly be voting for this motion and ensuring that local impacts, environmental impacts, are definitely high.
Can I ask Councillor Bourne to speak? You have up to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be voting for this motion, hoping to reject the government's proposals for nuclear, additional nuclear facility at Bradwell. I think we've heard some very good speeches already tonight. There's a lot of people in the chamber who feel very strongly about nuclear waste and all its byproducts, as well as the buildings and the infrastructure and the threat to wildlife and the environmental concerns. So I'll let those do that. I think what I've heard so far is very, very encouraging. I like the idea of Colchester United opposing together. I think that's something that we should do. If councillors can agree that, and we can get the MPs on board, then that's something to lobby the government with. I like the message. It's unsustainable, unsuitable and unacceptable. I don't like the fact that it's determined by the planning inspectorate. I don't like the move towards more centralised decision making that takes away from local decision making. We can put our objections in, but we have to wait like everyone else to see what happens. And it's not just West Mersey residents, of course, who are affected by this. But having said that, the district of Malden, most of the residents in the district of Malden live further away from the Bradwell power station than actually residents in West Mersey. So yes, as the road goes, it's a long way to Bradwell from here, but as the crow flies, it certainly isn't. We need to beef up our opposition to this to help all the other objectors to inform the government and remove the proposal for Bradwell B. And surely the government now have a better, more sustainable solution for this country's energy needs. Climate change effects are gathering pace, and the impact on Bradwell nuclear could be unforgivable at best and tragic at worst. The cost of human and wild lives is just too much for us to bear, and the other associated costs are too much for us to bear. So I will be voting for this motion, and I would urge everyone else to do so too. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Vaughan. Can I ask Councillor Dundas to speak, please? You have to have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Councillor Corey, I have to apologise for my slightly more casual attire than normal. I do support this motion. I think it is well worded, and I will compliment Councillor Corey on that as well. I think it enables everybody across the political spectrum to support it, and I hope they do so tonight. I also just want to say thank you to the councillors in particular who called it into scrutiny, in particular Councillor Jowers, who I think led it, bringing it to scrutiny. If they had not spotted that the submission we had put in did not really chide with the views which we're hearing tonight across the chamber, then that would have been our submission, and we would have had a submission which did not match the views of councillors. So thank you all to all of them for doing so. As others have said, this isn't about nuclear power. I think that's a debate for another time and place. It's also not a party political issue. I know the views cut across political parties. If we look at Hinkley Point C, that was conceived under a Labour government. The contract was signed by a Lib Dem Secretary of State, Ed Davey, actually, and the project continues under a Conservative government. So you have a quite a big sort of different views which cut across parties. So we have to make sure it's about Bradwell and whether that site in particular is suitable. Many people who know more about it than I do have spoken very eloquently, and I don't want to repeat that. But what I do say is I don't think we're being NIMBYs on this. I think there are particular issues with that site. I think it was arguably a marginal site in the 1950s when the original Magnox reactor was built. It is close to one of the most densely populated areas in Europe, and it is on an estuary. I know that estuary. I've known it since a child. I learned to sail around there. I know, like all of us do, that if you put anything in the water there, 6 hours later, it comes back to pretty much wherever it went in. It is not on the sea. It does not have that sort of current. It does not take the pollution away. It does not take the warm water away. So all I would say to everybody is please listen to what council says tonight and ensure that our final submission or our revised submission actually does reflect what councillors are actually saying in this debate. If that doesn't happen, then we will have to end up calling it in again, which I don't think anybody wants to do. So please, let's get it right this time. And I hope that everybody unanimously will be voting for this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dundas. I now open the subject up for a general debate amongst councillors. What we just heard are the council leaders, the group leaders, I mean. So can Councillor Tim Young please take the debate forward?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And first of all, I'd like to thank Richard Clifford for all the research he's done. I know he's gone back through council papers and agendas for decades looking at this issue, because it's certainly Bradwell has been an issue for Colchester Borough Council since before I got elected, and on and off since 1992 when I was elected. And to my mind, the vast majority of Colchester Borough councillors have always been against a nuclear power station at Bradwell because of a lot of the reasons we've heard, the inherent threats to the Blackwater, Mersey Island, and to our borough in general. Now, I'm surprised that the original consultation response was equivocal, because we've always been unequivocal. I contacted former councillor Paul Smith former leader of the council, and he, like I, thought the policy was in place. However, it's good to confirm and clarify the position which Councillor Corey's motion does. I met with Councillor Smith and Councillor Corey, Professor Andy Blowers a number of times from Bang, and with Peter Banks as well. And I'm glad Professor Blowers confirmed that in 2010 we had a very strong policy in place against new nuclear at Bradwell. Of course, nuclear power is once seen as the saviour of our energy needs and the promised provider of free electricity, and it's now, of course, in decline. Only around 20% of our energy comes from nuclear power, and it's due to go down to half that in the future. It's an industry that's in decline. Renewable energy, as we've heard, is the way forward as part of a mixed provision, and then hopefully total reliance on renewable energy. I've been to Clacton today, and I think it's a great sight to see the offshore wind farms off the coast in North Essex. Fossil fuels are obviously part of the past, and nuclear should go that way soon. Even though a country like France still relies on 75% of its energy from nuclear sources. So they've got more work to do than countries like the UK. So met with Bang a number of times. I could listen to Professor Andy Blowers all day. I think he's brilliant, such an expert on the subjects, and he really has put this into context with the other speakers that we had. You cannot control nuclear waste, whether you put it in steel bins, concrete, bury it, put it in the sea. There's always the danger of contamination and leakage. And of course, we've seen accidents at 3 Mile Island, at Windscale, which became Sellafield. Even at Bradwell, we've seen accidents occur and fires in Japan and in France. And of course, with that brilliant series on Chernobyl recently, how can anybody have any belief in nuclear power being safe? So as I had a t-shirt which read, nuclear power, no thanks. I think that's got to be the attitude of the council, as it always has been, as far as I'm concerned. But to confirm and make that strong position tonight, I certainly be supporting the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Can I ask Councillor Teresa Higgins to speak, please?
Yes, good evening, everybody. I'm actually speaking to you from France. If I lose my connection, that's because I'm on holiday. I want to support the motion. Several points to make. One, I think we were all pleased when the previous Bradwell was decommissioned, even though the late Mayor Tony Webb did work there. Two things I'd like to say also is there is the 7th century Chapel of St. Peter's on the Wall, Bradwell. At the moment, it sits in a glorious field with wheat all around it. It's a Grade 1 listed building. It will be affected by this new building, so I think that's something to consider. I'm also concerned about the warm water going back into the sea. Our oysters have had ups and downs throughout the years, and at the moment they are thriving, partly because we've not got the changes in the water temperature that the nuclear waste will put back into it. Another point is I am worried about the disposal of nuclear waste. Nobody has told me that it's safe wherever it goes. And my final point is, don't they realise that the east coast of England is sinking? Look at all those other places that have been destroyed over the centuries about the east coast sinking. I mean, that's what will happen to Bradwell. They've just removed a lighthouse in Suffolk. There's a medieval village under the water. It is sinking. It will disappear. So why build a new nuclear station there? So I will support the motion. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Can I ask Councillor John Jowers to speak, please?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and fascinating debate already. And clarify, it was my dismay. Actually, I've got to thank Councillor Lilly, who made a completely involuntary mistake. And because of that, it drove me to say, well, what is our policy? And it turns out we didn't have a policy. I thought like Tim did, that we had. In fact, my maiden speech in 1997 was about Bradwell. So it then had to go to mediation. Then it had to be called into the scrutiny committee, and now it comes here. And I'm amazed how swiftly our officers have managed to do this. Really impressed with Councillor Corey as well, that he suddenly realised that we were really in a useless position. Now, from a Mersey point of view, And I think the issue really is environmental issues more than anything else. A lot has been said about them. But there is a 2.4 kilometre guard zone to circle. And you know, it ends up just on the beach. And I always thought, even when the first power station was built, that there was some kind of confusion here. Why did it stop just before the major population settlement? Look at the windrows. Windrows is where the direction of any plume or any explosion or any radioactive waste would come from. Southwesterly winds. Mersey is right in the path of it. If we were lucky enough just to have that, if it was a major incident, it would reach Ipswich and beyond. Coma sites, like the ones near Canby Island and the main structural petroleum sites, actually have ovals of where the wind blows them. But no, that would have meant that they would, in the original one, they would have had to take Mersey into account. Malden is 14 miles upwind. Mersey is 2 miles, well, not even that, a mile and a half away. So that's one thing. The other one, the heating of the river. It's potentially 10 degrees centigrade. It takes 14 days for any water in the Blackwater, in the estuary, to circulate out. It's cumulative. And the reason I know that is because I actually did some of the dye tests where you put dye in the water and watch where it went to. Again, storage of waste, you know, there are so many things that have been brought to us this evening. I think that Councillor Smith assumed that we had an objection. I read actually the record of the meeting, and you would have thought, all of us would have thought, that Colchester Borough Council had a policy of objecting to Bradwell. We didn't. And that's what we're doing tonight. And that's why it's so important. And that's why it was absolutely essential to bring this forward. You know, marine conservation zone. One moment they put a marine conservation zone, which is a brilliant thing in, and next they're talking about this absolutely colossal industrial complex on one of the most beautiful, unspoilt parts of the county of Essex. But from the Colchester Borough's point of view, it is our only seafront. And oddly enough, what hasn't been mentioned is visual. Well, it has been mentioned, but you know, I was next to Sizewell last week, and you could look out to sea and it was fabulous. And if you looked at the corner, you saw Sizewell. From a Mersey point of view, we are going to be looking at a monstrosity right in front of us.
Finished.
And I think, Teresa, I've got a minute, have I left there? That's an interruption just then.
No, that's time, Councillor Giles.
That's time. Well, in another case, really support this. No objections to it all. Needs to be done. Please vote for.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Cyril Liddy to speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are many good reasons to oppose Bradwell B. There are the social and environmental costs of one of Europe's largest construction sites. Apart from the 24/7 working, light pollution, traffic congestion, interminable lorry movements in the Dengie Peninsula, there will also be other costs, such as a steep rise in house prices, so that locals living in rented accommodations will be forced out by Section 21 notices served by landlords seeking to capitalise on an influx of highly paid labour. Part of the plan is to provide long-term storage on site for highly radioactive spent fuel rods for at least 50 years to cool down. Bradwell B could pose a potential risk to maritime life in the Blackwater estuary, as well as to public health and safety, not to mention the nightmarish prospect of a mass evacuation in the event of an emergency. Colchester is within the evacuation zone, and as my many friends on Mersey Island never tire of telling me, there is only one road off the island. Given its remoteness from Colchester, it is unlikely that there will be many residents employed there. All these points were made 10 years ago by CBC when the project was first mooted. I simply want to concentrate on the economic, environmental and moral reasons to object to Bradwell B. The cost of renewable energy continues to fall with advances in technology and increasing investment. These capital costs are a fraction of the vast capital investment required to run a nuclear power station safely. Nuclear technology, as Councillor Young pointed out, is yesterday's technology, developed in the years following the Second World War, and it is also another argument that is far more eloquently expressed by others. My primary objection to Bradwell B and all other forms of nuclear technology is that of the legacy costs incurred by the need to store the spent nuclear fuel rods. These rods will have to be stored at Bradwell B for 50 years to cool down. They then must be transported to a safe repository for long-term storage. And when I say long-term, I mean well over 50,000 years. Britain was part of the European mainland until 8,000 years ago. I do appreciate that we cannot uninvent nuclear technology, and it does have its place. But the costs of safely storing and monitoring nuclear waste are a nightmare for policymakers, and the cost will have to be borne by future generations. In other words, we use the energy generated now, and our descendants bear the financial and environmental costs in perpetuity. Mr. Mayor, it is simply immoral to transfer the cost and the risk of storing spent nuclear fuel rods to others yet unborn. And for that reason, I'm opposed to Bradwell B and any other nuclear energy project of this size and scale. So I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lilly. Can I ask Councillor Dennis Willits to speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to support the motion and vote to safeguard Mersey and the rest of the borough from a proposed nuclear power station operated under the malign foreign influence of the Chinese. Mr. Mayor, I think this is a fundamental and strategic planning issue at stage 1 of the consultations, and it should be repeated at every possible opportunity during the consultation process. I mean, the current proposals, as has already been mentioned, would see a consortium involving a Chinese state-owned company and France's EDF providing the money. And I would add that I wouldn't trust either of those organisations 1 inch. And they will build, own and operate 2 reactors at Bradwell if it's given the great light. So in 12 years' time, we would see 2.2 gigawatts of electricity, enough for about 4 million homes, but also having the capability to blow Mersey and most of Colchester to kingdom come if anything went seriously wrong or was made to go seriously wrong at a time of tension. But if I can come back to something which I find even more worrying, Mr. Mayor, most of all, I'm appalled at the attitude of the Labour group on this issue. At the July council meeting, Councillor Lilly, who is the cabinet member responsible for these consultations on behalf of the whole of the borough, and speaks on behalf of the Lib Dem and the Labour administration, which controls the council, clearly had his eye miles off the ball. And this had to be corrected by the call-in from the Mersey members. During that debate, if you listen to the recording, Mr. Mayor, 5 times he said the administration was sitting on the fence over Bradwell. It was unbelievable. I couldn't believe my ears. He then went on to praise the scheme for providing some 900 jobs. It made my blood boil, Mr. Mayor. But of course, there has been long-standing ambiguity with the Labour position. I remember very well in an earlier debate shortly after I joined the council, when we debated Bradwell seriously for, well, it was the first time for me, probably the nth time for some of the longest serving members. The current leader of the Labour group proposed an amendment, said she considered the construction of such a facility so close to the borough of Colchester will arouse a great deal of local interest, discussion, and even controversy. You bet it will, Mr. Mayor. This is not the fighting talk that will convince the residents of Mersey and the south of the borough that the council really is on their side. Under no circumstances can I vote for a proposed development of a nuclear power station involving the Chinese. This project must be stopped, and I will be supporting the motion, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Willits. Can I ask Councillor David King to speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a shame that Councillor Willits has gone into the politics that divides us. That's not in the spirit of the rest of the discussion, I have to say. But here's my perspective. My thanks to all the speakers in the round and the visiting speakers. and for Mark Corey for shaping a motion, as others have acknowledged, that does fit the circumstance and will draw support. And I have my own concerns about the viability of the national energy picture and energy sources, like many members thoughtfully will. We're not at the point yet where renewables will do it alone, as we all know. But I'm influenced by my own time, some years inside or alongside the nuclear industry when I worked for the Ministry of Defence. And there's nothing like the inside view to give you a perspective. Going up on the wind scale piles, looking down, looking at the decommissioning going at a snail's pace, perhaps better now than it was those years ago. It was dismaying to see what can happen and how long it takes to put it right. I got involved in conversations, we touched on waste, around low-level waste, the DRIG, NIREX, high-level waste. I know where we stored stuff for the nation, and working with the energy providers, I understood their problems, they were mine. We were trying to find a way to decommission facilities that needed that treatment, and then we had to store them. So we have a legacy of the very worst kind, and we have therefore issues that are environmental in the spirit of the motion for the longer term, because our decisions have to be made upon our trust, our sense of risk, and the record of the industry. So not the shiny face alone, but also the realities of what's really gone wrong and often elsewhere. And lastly, I detest the fact that we are putting ourselves, in the hands of, in this case, France and China, for the security of our national energy supplies. There has to be a better way than that. And for those mixture of reasons, that inside understanding, the motion as it's crafted, the evidence provided about the impact, Mersey and elsewhere, and on the Blackwater, which I also sailed many years ago, Councillor Dundas, much less efficiently than you, I suspect. No, I oppose what's being done, and I support the motion, and I support efforts collectively across the chamber. Rare, wouldn't it be, for us to be joined up, to put pressure on government to change their strategy as well as its local effect. Thank you.
Can I ask Councillor Mark Gocher to speak, please?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're audible.
Good.
Yes, well done.
Okay, I will be supporting this motion, and I think it's very well crafted and very well worded. I support the broad pitch of the wording, focusing the objection just to Bradwell locally. I think that's very wise. However, that said, I'd just like to make it absolutely clear to anybody listening out there that I'm opposed to all new nuclear. As a general principle, I am a Niabi on this issue, not in anyone's backyard. I don't want to just take it and dump it on someone else. Now, I want to deal with some of the counter arguments that are sometimes used about new nuclear at Bradwell. One of them is that we need the jobs and that it will provide hundreds of new jobs. That's often said. Well, there are thousands upon thousands of new jobs just waiting to be created in the green economy, in green infrastructure for transport, building cycle lanes, other forms of green transport, in insulation and a massive national insulation program, in renewable energy. There are thousands of new jobs, some of which, of course, could come to Colchester. So I'm not going to accept the argument that people who are opposed to the new station at Bradwell are in some way anti-jobs, because I'm certainly not anti-jobs. I'm for jobs, but green jobs in the green economy. Secondly, it's sometimes said that we need a new nuclear station at Bradwell and in other places because of climate change. No, because of climate change, we need to be investing in renewables, not building a new nuclear power station on an estuary where the rising sea level may make it vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Climate change is an argument against building the station at Bradwell, not an argument for it. And we absolutely should be investing in renewable energy, both locally and across the country. And every time we support the building of something like a new station at Bradwell, we undermine the likelihood of investment and support for our own homegrown renewable energy industry, and instead are supporting a Chinese and French built monstrosity near our town. And I think we should be focusing on our own homegrown renewable energy industry. And also, I would add that there are more environmental issues that we need to be dealing with as a crisis than just climate change. There is also a biodiversity crisis. And for that reason, and for some of the reasons that have been made by some of the previous excellent speakers, I cannot support a new station at Bradwell that will do such ecological damage to the Blackwater estuary.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much, Councillor Gocher. Very interesting points there. Just to clarify, you have up to each speaker has up to 3 minutes. The bell goes at 2. Just in case you weren't sure of that, I'm sure you were. Councillor Pauline Hazel, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have been a lifelong anti-nuclear power, and I am very pleased to support this motion. If it could be strengthened even more, I would be very happy to support that as well, as I'm sure everyone would be. All the reasons have been given by some very wonderful and knowledgeable speakers. So I am happy to go for this motion, and I will happy to give my name and my support to any organisation that will campaign to stop this nuclear power station. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right. Councillor Robert Davison, please, Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just appalled, really, at the fact that the CVC haven't yet had a strong policy on Bradwell, because we've actually been living with it since the 1950s. We know John Jow has actually helped build it. It's that old. But seriously, the impact it's having on the environment under the old Bradwell original one, and actually the unproven design of this new one, why are we being put forward as guinea pigs? The site and the setting is completely wrong, as we've heard from the experts. It is up an estuary. There's a limited water flow. You've got up to a 7-meter global warming tidal rise over the next 50 years. It's just the wrong place. And actually, we've got no confidence in the design, or an unproven design. And it will affect Ipswich, Colchester, Tendring, and Mersey. Mersey, of course, being the closest community. And there's no way to evacuate Mersey. The government just needs to think again and find a more suitable site if they're committed to nuclear power. My other concern is that, having called in this totally inadequate response, can I be reassured by the leader that actually they will consult with experts to make sure it's a very robust and strong response to the consultation? There has been a lack of local consultation locally because of the COVID virus, and that needs to be addressed as well. But at this critical stage of the planning process, we need to be strong and united, and be totally convincing to government that actually this is the wrong place and the wrong design. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much for your contributions. Councillor Nick Barlow, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Back in 2008, along with Councillor Corey, Alderman Bowcley, the late Councillor Steve Ford and Councillor Chris Arnold, I was on the Task and Finish group where we looked at Bradwell, and it was a very fascinating time and a very fascinating group to be part of. And I think I just want to issue a bit of a warning based on some of the things we did there. Councillor Arnold was very good as the chair of that group to make sure we focus specifically on the issues around Bradwell. And I think we have to be careful as a council when we make our response, is that it is focused on very strongly on these site-specific issues. There's been a whole lot raised. I'm not going to go back and repeat them, but we have to be sort of careful because the government makes its own decision on the strategic thing. It will decide whether or not it wants to go ahead with nuclear power. We have to sort of be influencing on this site. We have to say specifically why there are problems with the Bradwell site, why these issues with the Blackwater, etc., need to be properly addressed, looked at, and our reasons for not doing it. But we have to be very careful, I think, not to stray outside too far outside that remit and focus our reaction on our response on that. So yeah, we're actually putting forward the strongest possible objection in our role as Borough Council and what is going to affect us. I think I'd just also like to raise one quick other point. I've been looking at a site tonight called Gridwatch, which is very useful if you want to go and Google it, which gives you details of where power is actually coming from to supply the UK at the moment. Because I've been a bit disappointed by councillors from all sides of the chamber having a quick dig at France and EDF doing that, because if you look at the moment, and generally most times, about 6% of our power in this country comes from France. So you know, there's an interconnector across the channel that brings in 2 gigawatts of power quite consistently. I find some of the xenophobia that's being on show here being a bit disconcerting and a bit, you know, sort of, it's not appropriate, I think, for this council to get into those sort of digs. Like I say, we need to be focusing our response on the site-specific issues about Bradwell and not trying to fight the entire issue of nuclear power. Thank you.
Councillor Kevin Bentley, please.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. I will be voting for this motion tonight, a very important motion as well. And I suppose there's part of me coming towards the end of the speakers, which have been excellent, by the way. I'm just pondering why all of this wasn't put into that original response, if I'm being honest with you, but there we are. What it has highlighted is the fact we didn't have a policy. And like others, I've sat in the chamber debating this, couldn't figure it out. But as the chair of scrutiny, I did ask officers who diligently went back, and there was no policy. So if anything good has come out of it, is the fact we're having this debate. There will be a formal policy from tonight, which is excellent. I want to applaud all my colleagues for getting it here as well, because that was very important. We could have let this thing slip on something that's going to be so critically important in the future. I want to just focus a bit on the construction traffic, as you might expect me to say, and it has been mentioned by some of our public speakers as well, because this site and the sheer scale of this site, I'm sure we've had a look, we've seen the consultation, the sheer scale of this on the peninsula out there is colossal. This isn't replacing what's already there, it's vast, it's much, much bigger than that. And construction traffic will come from all parts, predominantly going through Chelmsford, as I understand it, but also on the A12 as well. The whole way that's going to be constructed actually is not very green. It doesn't use sustainable transports from what I can see, and it's not very green. It's not the way to do it. I've heard there's been talk about bringing it in by boat, but I'm not entirely sure that's going to be practical either. So when we do our response, I hope we do focus on the fact that construction of traffic, or the construction traffic, is something that is going to cause a problem for everyone in this part of Essex, but also for us here as well. It's hugely important. I'm not going to repeat what others have said, because they said they have been excellent in their responses. What I would say is that this response obviously is going to be rewritten. I hope it is robust. I shouldn't prejudice myself, but I hope it doesn't come back to scrutiny. I hope it's that good. But actually, I think we should go beyond just the response and actually write to the government and to every other agency in the country that they know precisely where Colchester Borough Council stands on this subject. We don't want this power station built where it's going to be built. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gerard Oxford, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Beverly is not able to be here tonight, and Philip's still at work, but I know Beverly supported bringing this motion to full council for our group. So I just thought I'd mention that because it wasn't mentioned earlier. the original submission obviously was very, very weak. And this motion seeks to address that and make it very clear and send a very clear message that we are fully against Bradwell B. I never understand why, as an island, we're not looking at things like tidal. I'm sure there are people on the council and who gave evidence earlier who would know good reasons why we can't look at tidal, but the seas are always there and the tide goes in and out twice a day. So it would seem to be a more profitable way forward than nuclear, as one of the arms towards green energy. But then I'm not an expert at all, not at all on the subject. But we fully support this motion to send a very clear signal to government that Bradwell B is wrong. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Chris Pearson? I beg your pardon, Councillor Michael Lilly, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's very interesting tonight, and everybody's spoken really well, apart from one person, but we won't go into that one. And I thought the public speakers were brilliant. We talk about experts. They are the experts there. Peter Banks, who lives in Mersey, he's in the Green Party. And then you have Professor Andy Blowers, who speaks an awful lot of sense. And I've sat on Andy Blowers's committee, Bang, when we questioned the environmental health people. So, and some people have criticised me for my stance and where I stand. I think that my younger self would be disgusted with myself and where I am tonight, because I was the one I used to protest against nuclear power station, nuclear bombs. I was a member of CND. So I'm totally against any nuclear power station anywhere, to be honest. And that's where I stand. Now, we're here tonight and it's a brilliant meeting. And when people say my eye has been off the ball, actually, if you look at where we are tonight, we are here setting up a policy for the council so that we can do a proper report based on policy. And that report that we submitted before, we were stuck in a corner because the fault of the councils before me and the councillors who sat there and dealt with this before in the past never set up a policy for us to do. So you all dropped the ball and I've had to pick it up greatly on that. Thank you very much for all that. And the stick was not worth it. But here we are tonight. We're setting the policy and I think it's fantastic. So Councillor John Jowers has done a good job. He's quizzed me an awful lot, which is good. I think that we are where we are. All you got to do is watch the Chernobyl, the series, and look at that and then be very worried about if anything does happen than that. You talk about evacuation, but those people who lived at Chernobyl, it traveled to this country on the wind, and we were affected up north by the sheep from Chernobyl fallout. So be worried about that where we are. And we're stuck in between Bradwell B and Sizewell as well. And the other thing that people have mentioned, the Chinese, which is pretty disappointing having to go at foreign nations. I believe that UK Power Network is actually owned by 3 Chinese companies. I might be wrong on that, but perhaps we could check up on that and do some digging around. So that's maybe why the government is using them, because I think that it is the government policy to set this in there to build it, and they are using it. And it's worrying that their technologies are there. But I won't go on too much. And this has been great. So I thank everybody here tonight for speaking really well. And hopefully we are all together and we are Colchester United. Up the U's.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Can I ask Councillor Chris Pearson to speak now, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think we've had some terrific speeches. I would echo the sentiments that have already been expressed by a number of my councillor colleagues this evening. both from have your say speakers and also from members, with one exception. And I think it's a great shame that Councillor Willits decided to try and make a political point when it looks as though this evening we will have a unanimous decision across political parties, across our views about what we should do as an authority in response to Bradwell B. A number of points have already been made that I would have made about 3 Mile Island, about Chernobyl, about Fukushima. One of the things that hasn't been suggested or stated this evening is the actual proximity, not only of West Mersey to Bradwell B, but also of Colchester Town Centre. The town hall, I'll just remind everyone, is less than 12 miles from the site of Bradwell B. The exclusion zone for Chernobyl was 19 miles initially, extended beyond that eventually. The exclusion zone for Fukushima was originally 19 miles. And then the chair of the US Nuclear Regulatory Commission at the time recommended that that evacuation should be 50 miles or more. So we're not just talking about West Mersey at risk from any major incident at Bradwell B. We are talking about the whole of the borough of Colchester being at risk. I've looked at the consultation document and it talks about in the extremely unlikely event of an unplanned release of radioactive material off-site, there are plans in place that are underpinned by legal obligations to demonstrate the risks are as low as reasonably practicable. That's that interesting phrase that crops up in health and safety legislation. Just having a look at a national website around safe work, what it says in terms of what you must do to minimize any risks is, one, substituting wholly or partly the hazard with something with a lesser risk. Well, that would be impossible in this instance. Or isolating the hazard from any person exposed to it. And we know from previous accidents that that's an impossibility. So my concern, and I think Councillor Barlow made some important points about ensuring that, I mean, I've always been diametrically opposed to nuclear power, but I think it's important that we oppose it on all of the other grounds that have been expressed this evening. I think Councillor Davidson said quite rightly, we need to have a strong and united response from this council. And I am convinced that Councillor Mike Lilly will take that strong and united response out to the consultation. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Councillor Roger Buston, please.
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much indeed. I was one of the councillors that called in this matter, and I'm one of those responsible for the debate we're having tonight. And I didn't call it in on any views of a generic nature. I called it in because I think we needed a policy that needed to be tightened up, and we needed a policy that reflected accurately the views of this council. And I would like thus to commend the wording that Councillor Corey, the leader of the council, has put to this. He's clearly considered it very carefully, and I am satisfied with the wording that he's come up with. And therefore, I make no apologies for calling this in with the other councillors that did, because it's given the opportunity for a number of people to speak on a subject that we are all very keen to explore further and get to the depths of. We don't want to go into, I suggest, unnecessary rhetoric, but we need to know what the facts are likely to be and how they're going to affect our town. And we need, therefore, a policy to reflect what the majority of folk in this town, represented by us, think. And I think the way that the motion has been crafted by Councillor Corey is eminently satisfactory. And in a way, I'm perversely pleased that the earlier slackness in drafting has led to the revised policy and has led to the debate tonight, which I think has been very useful and very valuable. I shall therefore be supporting the motion. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buston. And finally, Councillor Adam Fox, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I think tonight has been a true example of a great debate in the council. I think some fantastic have your say speakers, and I think a real concerted approach from the vast majority of councillors to bring together the range of views in the borough about the potential for a new nuclear power plant at Bradwell. And I'd really like to thank those have your say speakers for bringing those particular local concerns, not only from within the borough, but extended to the Dengie Peninsula itself, and those people who live even closer to the potential of a Bradwell B power station. And I think the points raised about just how close the Colchester Borough sits to Bradwell B have been well made. And if I can, I would just like to defend my my friend and my colleague, Councillor Mike Lilly, because I think that he's been unfairly criticised tonight. In every conversation I have ever had with Councillor Lilly, he has made it absolutely known about his opposition to nuclear, and he regales me with stories of CND marches and his commitment over decades against nuclear power in all its forms. And I think that the comments against him this evening were uncalled for. I'd like to raise a couple of issues around some of the wider points, because I do feel that the international aspect of this power plant is important. And I think that there have been some mistakes made nationally over the last 10 years around the relationship that the Chinese state and the Chinese government have played in our economy. And Colchester and Essex has a proud history of standing up for human rights. And I think that it should not go unspoken that the Chinese state is making moves in Hong Kong, where we have historic interests, and I think against and the persecution that is going on against Uyghur Muslims in China at the moment, I think needs to be spoken about, and I think that we should raise those issues. I think the points that Councillor Lilly made about Chinese involvement in some of our national infrastructure are important points to make. But on a wider issue, I would also like to ask those that have influence and power elsewhere in the county to take forward this motion and to raise it in other places. So, for instance, Councillor Bentley has made some really important points this evening, and I would ask him and others, perhaps Councillor Jowers too, to take this motion and to raise this motion at Essex County Council, because I think that if there are such strong local views, that they should be made not just at Colchester Borough Council, but across district and borough councils and the county council in particular too, because they have such influence at a national level with this Conservative government. But I will be voting for this motion, along, I hope, with every single one of my council colleagues tonight. Thank you.
I'll let you go over a bit then, because I thoroughly agreed with what you were saying. So that was a very, very good contribution, I thought, at the end there. Get county involved as well, absolutely. Can I now invite Councillor Corey to sum up? You get 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. and thank you to all of those who were involved this evening. I think it has been a very good debate, as many have said. Thank you to those Have Your Say speakers that I thanked at the start for their contributions, and for all councillors who have inputted into tonight's discussion. Thank you to Councillor Young for thanking Richard Clifford, because Richard did go through the archives and find all the information for us that he put to the scrutiny panel meeting. And that actually was an eye-opener. That showed us that we did not have a clear policy. Although we had objected on Bradwell Nuclear at times, and particularly it was Councillor Barton's portfolio holder report where we did submit that view to government, it has not been a policy. So I agree with Councillor Jowers, we need a clear policy, and this tonight, it seems that most councillors are agreeable to having a clear stance in line with my wording, and then that will back up the submission from Councillor Mike Lilly when we rewrite our submission, adding in much more strength. I would also agree that it has been good cross-party agreement. Councillor Fox, his last points about getting county to also raise these objections would be really helpful. It was sad that Councillor Willits brought up political division and actually made that worse. I don't think that helped the debate at all. And we could all look at different governments and their involvement with the Chinese and see that as a negative, and blame could be put everywhere. I mean, Councillor Davison seems to blame Councillor Jowers for building it, but I wouldn't go that far. So I thank everybody for the cross-party support to the motion that I've put forward this evening. We're voting to protect our planet, we're voting to protect our local environment, and we're voting to actually make a policy absolutely clear from Colchester going forward. So I won't take any more time. Mayor, I would ask us all to vote in favour of this motion to object on local grounds to nuclear power at Bradwell. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Can I ask the monitoring officer, please, to lead the vote, to administer the vote?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, could you please indicate whether you're voting for, against, or whether you are abstaining? Councillor Barlow.
For.
For. Councillor Bourne. Sorry, Councillor Bentley, I apologise.
For.
For. Councillor Bourne.
For.
For. Councillor Buston.
For.
For. Councillor Chapman.
For.
For. Councillor Chillingworth.
Unmoved.
Councillor Chillingworth, are you there?
Not there.
I'll come back. Councillor Chua.
For. For.
For. Thank you, Councillor Chillingworth. Councillor Chua.
For.
For. Councillor Corey.
For.
For. Councillor Dundas.
For.
For. Councillor Elliott. Someone's doing the washing up. I'll come back. Councillor Fox.
For.
For. Councillor Gocher.
For.
For. Councillor Goss.
For.
For. Councillor Harris.
For.
For. Councillor Hayter.
For.
For. Councillor Hazel.
For.
For. Councillor Higgins.
For.
For. Councillor Hogg.
For.
For. Councillor Jarvis.
For.
For. Councillor Jowers.
For.
For. Councillor King.
For.
For. Councillor Liddy.
For.
For. Councillor Lilly.
For.
For. Councillor Loveland.
For.
For. Councillor Jackie McLean.
For.
For. Councillor McCarthy.
For.
For. Councillor Gerard Oxford.
For.
For. Councillor Pearson.
For.
For. Councillor Scordis.
For.
For. Councillor Warnes.
For.
For. Councillor Whitehead.
For.
For. Councillor Willits.
For.
For. Councillor Wood.
For.
For. Councillor Julie Young.
For.
For. Councillor Tim Young.
For.
For. The Deputy Mayor.
For.
For. The Mayor.
For.
For. And Councillor Elliott?
Four.
Thank you. Thank you. That's unanimous, Mr. Mayor.
Yay.
Well, that was a really good debate, I thought. A lot of really good contributions from all sides and from our visiting speakers. I thought it was very well led by the council leader, and I enjoyed listening to everybody's contribution. And with that, I bring the meeting to a close. So thank you very much again to everybody. This technology works very well, doesn't it? Everybody does contribute.
But not in Tiptree.
Not in Tiptree. Well, we did have a slight hiccup over the sound before, but you don't need to know about that. So once again, what an interesting debate, and wonderful to hear the council speaking together in that way. So congratulations to all of you. And now we have a policy. Yes, so well done again. Cheers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Bye-bye.
Is that it, Mr. Mayor? Is that it?
Unless you've got another item. Have you got another item? No, I better not do that.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye.